The third and final chapter of Netflix's adaptation of R.L. Stine's Trilogy is now streaming on Netflix, and they left the best for last. This is my review of Fear Street Part 3, 1666. Finding herself trapped in Sarah Fear's body, Dina witnesses the origins of the curse as they're finally revealed, and history comes full circle on a night that changes the lives of Shadysiders forever. Now, before I start with my review, there will be no spoilers for this film, but it is now streaming on Netflix. You can go check it out, and you can check out my reviews of the previous 2 chapters. They're now on my channel, and I'll link them somewhere above or under my head. And I want to know what you think of the previous 2 chapters of this final one. What do you think of the trilogy as a whole? Did you read the books? Let me know all of that in the comments below. Throw it all down there. Start the conversation. It is the most important part. And while you're down there, if you're new to the channel, first of all, thank you for clicking on the video. Why don't you consider clicking the subscribe button? It helps the content a lot to get out there. You'll be supporting me and joining a beautiful film fan community. As much as I enjoy the first 2 Fear Streets for really leaning into the slasher tropes of slashers from the 90s, 80s, 70s, I love Fear Street Part 3 because it goes back in time, it takes this deep, twisty turn, and it has a lot more elements of movies like The Witch, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, not to mention this past decade, probably my number 1. Fear Street Part 3 really lingers on building suspense, building fear for our characters that we already care about because we're watching these, granted different characters, but because they're the same actors, we already have a connection. So that was really smart of the filmmakers to decide to cast this film in that way. The setting just inherently has this constant sense of tension, as not only do we have an idea of what is already going on, people were easily suspicious and fearful of things like witchcraft, and they were very misogynistic, and they didn't like people being gay around them and stuff like that. And so there's an inherent build of tension from the moment this film starts playing. And I really enjoyed how the film, despite casting actors that we've seen in the previous 2 movies already, they're playing different characters, the stories are really different. We really see how things played out, and the actors are basically just guides. But Fear Street Part 3 doesn't forget its origins, even though they happen later, chronologically speaking. The film still is holding on to a lot of surprise to offer when it comes to the characters that we already know from the previous 2 movies in 1994 specifically. There's a moment in the 3rd act that you really don't see a lot in movies, especially horror, and it's awesome. It's extremely satisfying. As far as a final chapter in a trilogy offering a satisfying payoff and really earning the completion of certain characters' arcs, this is really enjoyable. I love how the story plays out. I love the little secrets that are unveiled and how it all connects. We also do our biggest and deepest dive into the lore and all the Shadyside, Sunnyvale killers throughout history on this one. We get to know their stories better, we get to know our characters' perspectives on it better, and there's just a whole new look into everything in this film that I really liked. It comes with it being the final chapter, it comes with it being the final one in the trilogy, and that's probably why I'm a huge fan, for the most part, of finality. Whenever you have a trilogy or a franchise and then the last one comes, I'm usually a big fan of those the most because they just work, they just pay off. I'm a big fan of payoff, and this one has it and does a splendid job at giving it to us, the audience. And the violence and gore continues to be great. I love how this film has not shied away from any of that, and it's glorious. I also really appreciate that it is mostly practical effects, and it really works in favor of the film. It feels grungy, it feels very in the moment, it feels like these things are actually happening. The acting in general, I couldn't talk about Gillian Jacobs in the previous 2 reviews, but she's awesome in this film. She was awesome in those two. Everyone does such a great job. It was so easy to continue to like these characters, but find myself liking them even more in this third one, having gone through this entire journey with them. And the change of pace that happens halfway through the film is really a drastic change, but it works so well for this film. It really changes at the midpoint, which is one of the most important parts of the film. Our characters learn something that drastically changes the stakes, and from then on there's a different cadence and pacing to proceedings. There's a new way of doing things. It just feels like they put two movies into one, but it works. It's a really good thing in this case. When it comes to issues, this film still has a few, even though I think it's the best film out of the three. There's one moment in that midway point where a character makes a conclusion, solving basically an entire puzzle, and I don't mean a literal puzzle, but they figure something out with having just one piece of this thing, and I'm like, wow, I'm so happy this character was right, because if they weren't, things would have turned out real bad for everyone. And this might feel like a nitpick, in many ways it is, but the first half of this film, since it has actors from part 1 and 2, they have accents because of the time period, which I think it's proper to attempt at portraying the accents of the time. But some of these actors, especially some of our main ones, they just couldn't make it work. They were really bad accents, which is fine. Accents are not easy to do. They're complicated. You have a dialect coach, and sometimes you still can't crack it. It's okay. Just don't do it, especially because they went this route of casting familiar faces to play these different people in the past. I wish they hadn't done accents. I found no need for them, especially for the actors that really couldn't crack them. Again, it's fine to not be able to do an accent, especially an Irish accent. It's really hard. Just don't do them at all, I think. Fear Street Part 3 1666 leaves the trilogy on a high note, giving us the most scares, the most gore, the most action, and the best out of all these characters with a really interesting turnaround. And do not turn off immediately as the credits start rolling, because there's something to be seen there. I'm giving Fear Street Part 3 1666 an A-. I had so much fun with this trilogy of films without having even heard of the books before the movies were announced, so I'm so glad I got to cover it and watch these films with you. So let me know what you thought of Fear Street, all of it, parts 1, 2, 3, throw it all down there, talk about them all. I would love to know your thoughts, and thank you so much for watching. You are the best. If you've watched this far but still haven't subscribed, why don't you do it? Click it, or I'll unleash the curse of Seraphir on you. Thank you so much for watching. You are the best. Stay tuned for many more reviews to come very soon. I hope to see you in those, and so until then, love each other and love the movies.